Welcome back to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we have a great one for you today. This edition is made possible by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Hi, Alain.
Hey, good afternoon, Fred.
Good afternoon. And with us today is Chuck Cook, who has been one of the original 10 Tesla FSD Beta testers. He's been doing that for over a couple of years now, based in Jacksonville, Florida. Hi, Chuck.
Hi there, guys. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
I'm glad to have you, Chuck.
Well, you have many followers on YouTube as you chronicle the good and bad about FSD beta releases, currently V10.6.9.3, and you were featured by Cade Metz in the New York Times a few days ago. The headline being, "What Riding in a Self-Driving Tesla Tells Us About the Future of Autonomy." I guess a spoiler alert would be it still has a long way to go, right?
It's doing a lot of things amazingly well, but the world's a big place and we have a lot of problems to solve. But I like to think every problem has an engineering solution. We just have to figure out how to scale or figure out how to solve the problems.
And Chuck, you have what would seem to be a perfect background for this. If you don't mind sharing that with our audience and how it came to be that you're one of those in the front lines of beta testing FSD in your Model Y.
Sure. Well, I don't know that my background is perfect for this or not. It obviously got the attention of some. Generally, I'm an engineer trained at the Naval Academy years ago. I was a pilot in the U.S. Navy for about 25 years, both on active duty and the reserve. I joined a major U.S. airline. I'm a technical leader at this airline. I'm a developer. I'm a beekeeper. I love to talk about all sorts of things. I like to take things apart and put them back together. But ultimately, I think the skill that I bring to this that maybe everyone doesn't have is that of aviation and the use of automation systems that are very well regulated and certified today and do a very, very good job. There's a lot of philosophies that are the same between autonomous driving and the way we use autonomy and I should say automation more than autonomy in aviation. So that's where I think I'm comfortable. I love talking about it at an engineering level. And I'm really just glad to be a part of the solution. I'm not looking to pick it apart, but I love trying to figure out how it works.
Let me pick up on something you just said, if I may, if we could go automation instead of autonomy, or that there's a difference there. Of course there is, but please, because a lot of people think the two words are synonymous, and please.
Well, this is a fascinating thread, and I don't know if we have the time for it, but in an aviation system, we have three levels of automation. You're manually flying the plane. Think of it as stick and rudder, like a civilian pilot might in their Cessna 172. But then you take up these different levels of automation. You can turn on an auto throttle. In the car, that's the equivalent of basically traffic-aware cruise control, where you give control to the car. You can go to the next level of automation where you give it lateral control. That would be just like giving an autopilot some heading control. And then you take it to the very highest where it controls both the speed and the lateral and the vertical movement in an airplane. And that's kind of full self-driving, where it now has full control. But the first rule in aviation is if something's not going right, lower the level of automation, simplify the automation being used, and take control of the situation. And that's where I am right now today as an FSD beta tester managing that automation system. But true autonomy, I think of a drone with no pilot. We're not there yet. But automation are driver assistance or pilot assistance systems that take control to let the pilot open their field of view, look at more information around them, but not necessarily have to take the brain cycles away for full control of the airplane that the aircraft is completely capable of doing. And the Tesla car works very similar. A lot of parallels there.
Yeah, but if we go to the drone, even the drone isn't autonomy, is it? I mean, it's not doing it on its own. It has a whole host of folks back there really telling it what its mission is, what it's supposed to do, constraining what the heck it's about to do, and it's just basically operating within that constrained envelope, isn't it? It's not autonomy.
There's a very subtle point in what you just said there, and I will agree with you. Yes, absolutely. You could pre-program a mission. You could have something programmed to go do what you did, much like a computer program can be written, but it's locked into that constrained domain, operational domain at that point, right? It's not out there making decisions very often on its own. Well, whether or not to, in a military sense, release weapons or not, shoot or not, or just go out there and take pictures or not, whatever the mission of the drone is. So you're right. Autonomy to some people means, oh, look, it's managing the navigation on its own. But true autonomy also includes decision making. That is where the real world AI that Elon refers to, or perhaps needing full AGI, is the point that we're reaching for.
Yeah, I guess I would say we shouldn't even bother. I mean, to me, these things are tools to do something for us. They're not put out there to do something for themselves. I think I don't know. I don't think any of these developers have sort of put it out that way. And if they're going to be tools for us, then in fact we have to set the constraints. We have to say what the mission is. We have to give it its options to choose from, and give it and probably tell it how in the heck to choose from those things. So if it's the provision of mobility, you have to be able to go from here to there at a certain time in certain weather conditions and and do that. You just don't get out and say, hey, yo, boy, it looks good to me. I think I'll do it now, right?
Wow.
I mean,
Alan, we just started a podcast, and I realized we don't have enough time because we just went down a little rabbit hole that we could do this for a long time. Because I do think some level of automation is required to get to self-supervised learning, which is probably the only way I truly think that what we're trying to solve can be accomplished, because collecting and labeling data sets is not a scalable problem until we get to self-supervised learning, to where it learns much like a human learns through feedback loops of getting burned or getting hit in the head or running into a tree because you didn't see it.
Right. I mean, there's a long, because to get to that self-supervised thing, you have to have the feedback limits on it. It's a darn good thing we feel it warm as we approach the fire. Otherwise, we would have all been cooked by now, and none of us would be here, right? I guess. Anyway, I didn't want to take us down, but to me, I think again we could be trying to do everything, but it seems to me that many of the folks out here have gotten lost in trying to do everything, and are not doing really anything, or not doing anything that they could be doing. I look at FSD, and I agree with you. It does a lot of things really well. And Elon's probably right when he goes out and says it is actually safer than us driving. He certainly has the data to prove that. I've asked him to release it to me or somebody else, so somebody could do an independent evaluation. Not that we don't believe him, or not that we think he's cheating. It's we're used to peer reviews in this business, and we're used to having just to make. And I think I certainly believe that it is. But it is within a very constrained set. And the question is how can we take where this thing works and start delivering some fundamental value to at least somebody on this? And this is what I've appreciated what you've done. You've identified some things, you've shown, or you've demonstrated that by collecting data on those, the training procedures that they go through, and they've built in Dojo and whatever and so on and so forth, and the deep learning actually does get the dials set a little bit better, so that in fact the algorithms in there are able to do a reasonable job, or better than reasonable job, in sensing the environment and doing the right thing, because it's making decisions every 20th of a second or something like that on all sorts of things. Right. Yeah.
I do have some thoughts on what you said, and I do agree with what you said about trying to solve the problems in some operational design domains, the ODDs. And Elon, since the shareholders meeting, has started to refer to a dedicated robotaxi platform. This is the third generation platform that they're on. Then they're calling the Model 3 and the Model Y the second generation. And I think this third generation is still unknown to us on what is special about that makes it unique to robotaxi. I personally, and if you've listened to a lot of my content, am a pretty staunch person saying the hardware we have right now, both cameras and compute, is not capable of getting to the end game that they're stating is their end game. So we can either change the line on where we're trying to get to, which is an amazing automated driver assistance system at level 2 that essentially takes workload off of the driver, or if we're really trying to get to a driverless system to get the regulatory approval for a driverless system, I think we need to let the handcuffs off of the Tesla team and let them iterate on hardware, on software, and the neural network technology they're using. Just as an example, the occupancy network is a very new technology they've incorporated. You know, when they started this problem back with Mobileye, they hadn't even incorporated that. So as these nets get more and more complex and bring some academic solutions into the problem, they're iterating. Hey, let's put some different cameras on there. Let's put them in different locations. Let them iterate. Elon is both hamstrung a little bit by promises of having FSD on his customers' cars since 2016, and he's also unconstrained in the academic and engineering world, letting his guys go solve the problem. And he's trying to manage it all through Twitter, which is, you know, a whole nother problem in and of itself. So I'm an engineer. I'm like, let the engineers be engineers. If they need to go to another platform to get us there, great. But back to the design domain. I think my situation is living proof that if the engineers come to a station, they bring the drivers, they work on a problem, they can incorporate new tools, which to me is new nets. So think of the median network they added, the creep limit network for the ADAS driver, and then solve some problems. They pinpointed a problem, they solved it. How many of those are they going to do to solve the world is unconstrained. So to your point, maybe this robotaxi network could be solved in a location like San Francisco, where they have a lot of time, or dedicate some of the cities you mentioned in our pre-brief. I do think constraining the operational domain is the shortest path to getting autonomy, and we already have some companies that are doing that today, such as Waymo, and you know they got some Chandler, Arizona design domains. But whether or not you're going to get into the LiDAR debate, the high definition mapping debate, I think that's the engineering problem, and let the engineers solve it. But at the same time, you got to kind of shrink the problem if you're going to meet timelines that are not unscalable, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we can get back to some of those and we can discuss some of the approaches that we've taken. I would like you to spend a little bit of time talking about your unprotected left turn. My initial thought of that left turn is I don't think I can do it. Okay, I mean that thing is so complicated. It surprises me that Florida DOT permits it. I mean, how many lanes do you have to cross to be able to get into that little shelter area to be able to then figure out what the heck's coming at you from the other direction? It just seems, I mean, yet apparently, you know, through the various efforts that you've made, you know, FSD apparently does it pretty darn well now. It realizes that, yes, there is a little patch out there that you can stop, take a breath, see what the hell's going on, and then move forward if you can, as long as that thing is unoccupied. Okay. If somebody's already there, you're like, I don't know what the engineering solution is in that, but you're in deep caca. Let's put it that way, right? So talk to us about that one.
Well, I was going to say, Alan, that they've actually used Chuck's name in some of the release notes.
Yeah, right? No, I know they have.
Chuck Cook style left turn.
Yeah, which is, it's funny. Everybody's famous for something. I like to say, I didn't think that was going to be what it was for me. But in any case, let's talk about this turn a little bit. So there are several parts. Obviously, when you're encountering high-speed cross traffic, which is one of the constraints in this problem, and the traffic is going about 50 to 60 miles an hour, and when you come perpendicular to the stop sign, the only camera that has a view of the oncoming traffic is the B-pillar camera that has the lowest stated range of any camera on the car of 80 meters. Now, granted, maybe their bag of points and their other trickery is getting further than 80, but let's just say it was 100 meters. If a car is going 60 miles an hour at 100 meters, the actual detection to collision time is in the 3.4 to 3.6 second range. So you've got some jitter and some latency to deal with in there. We have some perception identification to deal with in there, and a whole lot happens. And then let's just assume that anyone in that car is going to want about a 1 second buffer to impact anyway. So you got 2.5 seconds to deal with. So it is a hard problem to detect high speed cross traffic. If you take a parking lot kind of protected left-hand turn, and the car is only going 25 or 30 miles an hour, it's a completely different problem because
Right,
perception has the time it needs to solve the perception problem. But what Tesla did is they used what they had and they threaded the needle a little bit, and functionally, depending on certain traffic scenarios, it has all of the mechanics to do it. It put in a right-hand turn that allows it to get in the median at the right angle. It broke the problem into two parts, which is a basic engineering tactic, is to take a hard problem, break it up, and solve it individually. By going to the median, they allowed the car to only get to the median first and then wait. And then, ironically, when it's in the median, it now has a repeater camera that is at the perfect angle to view the traffic that is also brought into the solution. So I think it's just breaking it apart. What can they solve? But truly, it's not an optimal set of sensors that they're using to solve it, but they mechanically got it to a higher level of success rate. But the problem is the number of nines I think you need on this problem is very high to get regulatory approval to pull a driver out of the seat. That there are so many variables that exist in that problem with high-speed cross traffic that I don't feel that we're going to be the end game with what we have on problems like that with cross traffic. So I think it's fun to watch him do. I want to answer your initial thing about you saying you wouldn't be able to do it. I've lived in this neighborhood where I'm doing this testing for about 30 years. And over the 30 years, there have been more accidents at the stoplight than at that intersection that I do in an unprotected left-hand turn maneuver. And the reason is because if I'm going through a green light and just give the light my complete trust, every accident that's ever happened has been somebody running the red light, T-boning someone and killing them at that intersection. Somehow when the humans are paying attention at that unprotected left scenario, it's actually safer to the DOT here than the light, which is ironic and not necessarily intuitive.
Yeah, and also I suspect that you learned that in fact you could use that little strip out there to sort of take a breath, and you broke the problem up into two pieces, whereas maybe somebody who's not been in that neighborhood, who's not used to breaking this is a very tough problem wherever it exists. The separated lanes that have a median in it and so on. People get stuck in those things all the time. You can even go back to the Brown crash, the first one. Here there's a truck standing broadside, who's trying to make the unprotected left, came across, probably didn't see Brown, saw they couldn't get into the gas station and stopped, and poor Brown just got decapitated by it. And these are very dangerous intersections wherever they occur, and they occur in a lot of places. My argument might be in terms of trying to get some value out of this, to be able to pull the driver out of there, because I'm really looking at situations in which you don't need a driver. Why? Because then the mobility is affordable. Right now, the issue is if you have to pay not only a driver to drive for you, but also wait around for you. That's the real expense of the chauffeur. The chauffeur is not very expensive if they're just driving you. Where the expense is where they're waiting around for you. So if you want the demand responsive mobility that one has when one owns a car and be able to provide that to somebody as a service, then you have to take both of those pieces, and putting a human in that is very expensive. And the thought is my goodness, if Elon's only going to charge $15,000 for this, oh my good, do you know how cheap that is? Do you know
it's groundbreaking?
You distribute that over a vehicle could probably serve 100-person trips a day or something like that, 300 days a year. The per trip cost is essentially zero. So all of a sudden you have Uber, Lyft, and which is a real value proposition that one could be putting out there. But to put that out there is I would avoid all those unprotected lefts. I'd make the right in the right, and whatever.
Okay,
whatever
so
it takes.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah, so
I was hoping you were going to say the right and the right.
Yeah, or
so
whatever.
The right turn introduces a unique solution, and many UPS optimizations are trying to use right turns. They're quicker, save fuel, safer, all of those sort of things. Ultimately, if you're going to take a right turn, a second right turn doesn't always solve it. So right turn is one way out of an intersection with high-speed traffic, but ultimately, I think it's another right turn or a U-turn.
Yeah. Or
If you go right,
turn.
a U-turn.
Yeah.
So my question would be, do you think a U-turn is safer than an unprotected left turn? Because I think the detection of the drivable space to the left of the B pillar has to be so accurate that the car has to know it can do the turn without creating a 3-point turn scenario that in high-speed cross traffic would be even more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, in Jersey, we have jug handles. Okay, so that we never have to make a left. All right.
Yeah.
And so therefore, there are things. I think that if you look at many places to get from many A's and B's, there are easy ways to drive it, or safe ways to drive it, and more challenging ways to drive it. And what I would like to see done here is for them, first of all, to really define which problem they're trying to address. If they are trying to make it so that if I buy a Tesla, I cannot be Airbnb it out there and generate revenue for it. In other words, put it out there for a bunch of other people to use. I mean, to me, that's almost crazy. Okay, because first of all, I'm not very good at maintenance and whatever, and who's gonna be responsible? Really, I'm gonna be responsible for both the safe and the legal operation every time that Airbnb goes out there driving, and I don't know. Of course, it's not gonna speed. Otherwise, I'm gonna get all the tickets. I mean, it's just it's impractical as a business proposition. I think if you actually look at it, it's kind of interesting and kind of whatever. But if I'm an operator trying to provide the mobility, if I'm really a Lyft or an Uber in a constrained area between certain points, then what I'm going to do is be very careful that I do deliver that mobility just within that area. And there may be easy ways for me to do that in the large, such that the regulatory entities actually see that it does work. Right? Hey, I can run it for a year without any disengagements. Just keep it knows every time you grab the wheel, right?
Oh, it absolutely knows. Yes.
It absolutely knows. Now, you can go fake the data, but none of us do that. No, and we shouldn't even think about doing that. But you could put up you've even kept score on when it does and when it doesn't, when it goes to this, and when it went in the parking lot and when it didn't, and so on. Well, you keep tweaking that thing, you keep running it, you keep giving it more well labeled data, which is a challenge in and of itself, but we won't go down that one, so that it ends up, hey, it works, and then regulators have to say, okay, why do we have somebody in there? When's the last time you saw? Go ahead.
I think basically Tesla is already doing that in some respect. And I've had some conversation with some employees at Tesla that have said, we've got to go to Boca Chica to fix Elon's drive. Or, we've got to go to Austin to fix Elon's drive. Now, what that really means is Elon is saying, or the team is saying, this is where he's spending a lot of his time driving these alpha builds he's driving, and he's seeing problems. Let's go fix them. And ultimately, his drives get fixed, which is exactly what you're saying we could do with a constrained operational domain. Tesla just has to get to the point of saying those words. Constrained environment is where robotaxi will be on the next platform. I also think the next platform is where this is going to be. I don't think that you're going to hear them publicly say, the robotaxi Airbnb word platform will be on the current cars. They haven't said either yet. So I think it's this next generation they're working on at the lab right now. The $15,000 point, I think that $15,000 is the consumer level of FSD that is affordable. But if you truly create a platform that can generate the revenue that you've articulated, it needs to be app level access, over $100,000 probably. So, but that's a monetizable business at that point, just like a medallion for a cab in New York is. It's a different level. But the consumer, we got to keep it at the price point that it's affordable, because there's so much safety involved in this. capability. I would love my son or my daughter who wants to buy their first car to be able to afford a Model 3 with FSD. But if FSD continues to go up in price, the percentage of the total cost of the car is starting to get out of balance. And we got to figure out how they're going to divide those two products in the long run.
So let me ask you a question there. To what extent do you think it can become safer as a, let's call it the level 2, when you remain? One of the statements I make is that, supposedly 90% of the crashes involve human involvement. Okay, I say 90% of the crashes involve human misbehavior. They're all misbehavior. If I start looking at my phone, that's misbehavior. If I drink too much, if I if I scratch my butt, if I check out this, if I fall asleep, those are all misbehaviors. When we behave, we are darn good, aren't we? I mean, we are.
Yeah.
And so I think FSD, where it is now, handles or whenever you get yourself between the rock and a hard place, does a pretty good job of saving you. And as long as you remain attentive, you hop in the back seat, forget about it. Okay. I mean,
I think it's got a long runway of making it much safer. And I like to articulate that it's getting really, really good at the middle of the drives. It's the beginning of the drive and the end of the drive that still have these rough edges on it, right? So I got to get out into the traffic and then go straight. And now it's in its perfect world. It can do this really, really good. A little bit of confusion on map data, language of lanes, and some of the new things they're incorporating. But this language of lanes using GPT-3 is brand new. So that's going to get better. Absolutely. So the middle of the drives are getting really, really good. We need to work on parking lots. We need to work on U-turns. We need to work on the unprotected lefts and high-speed cross traffic. We need to get from my driveway to the parking lot, and the end of those drives need more attention. The middle is just getting really, really good, with the exception of some bad blinkers and lane change decisions that create its own problems that the humans avoid through experience right now.
If we work more in cooperation, okay, if we weren't so insistent that this does everything for us, if it does, I mean, as you know, you want to use people where they are best useful, and you want to use technology where it's better useful. And I think in the airplane and so on, you found a perfect marriage between these two things. So why shouldn't it be that we start it out, we finish it up, and in the middle, it lets us relax and so on, as long as we don't go goofy. Okay, as long as we don't, as long as we don't say, hey, whatever, all the other goofinesses you can name yourself. And then in a sense, it then delivers enormous value to us. It allows you to buy this for your children and have them be safe, as long as they realize that you can't take somebody who's had too much to drink from the bar to the bed. Okay.
Yep.
Because you do have to deal with these beginning and end points. Okay, maybe in the middle it can do it, but if the person isn't able to deal with the beginning and the end and a couple places in the middle, and it knows, I think it now knows pretty well when it's about to get in trouble, right? To some extent. I don't know.
I think you've hit a great point, and I think I'm a supporter of this message, and I would try to do it. I think the reason we're having trouble admitting this is because of some promises that have been made and expectations of what people think they paid for. If we could get away from that rhetoric and just say, oh my God, the human plus the car is an amazing combination, I'm all for this, because we are where we are no matter what we thought we were getting.
Well, it would seem to me, from a business point of view, if not to advise Elon on a business point of view, but to say, look, if somehow I misinformed you and you thought you were getting more here, let me give you your money back, because the value that one gets, the value that one gets out of the middle, and the value that one gets in terms of the enhanced safety that it does deliver, and the value that it is paying attention to some things that you're not paying attention to, and all these kinds of things are so darn valuable that you might say, hey, that's fine, I'm happy to pay that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think,
Anyway,
let's take a look at one of the videos of the unprotected lefts that you have in mind.
Yeah, so we have a turn here where the car is coming up to the stop sign. It does a nice stop, but I want you to notice a few things. In the drone view in the lower left, I've got the tree distances measured with a laser rangefinder that's kind of showing you the range that the camera is stated as being able to see. And then the blue median in the middle, notice when that's blue, it's identified where it thinks it can go into the median like it did just there. And there was no traffic coming from the right, and it proceeded straight through without even stopping. That was a perfectly executed unprotected left with just a little bit of light traffic. And I think it's great. But some things that I do here for the viewers that want to understand, that little black bar above doesn't come with the car. That is extracted CAN bus data that I overlay my videos. So you can actually see the torques on the motors. You can see the jerk acceleration that's happening. And it kind of helps analyze this in post view. Now here, look at this. We have traffic in the median this time that it has to deal with. So as it approaches the stop sign, you can see it's created the creep limit, but it has the car identified in blue in the median. That's a car it's going to have to deal with. It's still mapping the median. Now here in this situation, the car crossed. Quite a fleur-de-lis we have going on here. And my car is scooting up to the creep limit, even though our car to the right is still trying to merge. Kind of a little bit rude there for those of you that realize I just blocked his obstructed view to the left. And now in this gap here, it's going to proceed to the median in that blue area again. And it should probably proceed right after this car. And there it goes. A little bit of pre-roll, a little bit of a right turn, a little bit of a left turn, and it's going to wait right here until that last car goes by, and it's perfectly waiting in the median here, and then it proceeds. So that is the dynamics of an unprotected left broken into two parts. It's got to get up to the creep limit to give the B-pillar the best view. It's got to work itself to the median, stop, pause if there's traffic oncoming, and then proceed into the second half. And I've done this thousands of times now. It's quite fun. I enjoy doing it, but I know to some people it's a little scary.
As we can see here, the blue line ahead of you is a trajectory that it intends to follow right now in terms of its decision as to where it can move forward. And if one watches that, as you approach that, one sees that shrink, and then all of a sudden when it decides that there's enough room, it then pops it out, and we can watch it and see the two pieces of this maneuver that you've described very well.
Exactly.
And here, right here, it's just creeping up a little bit, and this is to me a really tough. I mean, if I'm driving this, I don't know how you are when you're driving it. You must say, "What do I do?" And every once in a while, it sort of indicates that maybe I have a route up there as to where I want to go, but because the car is there, I'm really not going to go ahead and follow that trajectory.
Yeah, I love to watch when the median network shows and it doesn't show. It's also kind of giving me some insight as to how good its perception is. Here's a good example of that creep limit too. That creep limit is a projection of where it is determining the drivable space is on the other side, not to cross it. That was a huge improvement. I think, to the logic. Although I will say, I think the creep limit is a driver pacification tool. In other words, the car does not need to display that for its own function. It does need to calculate it, but it doesn't need it to show it to the driver. So it was a little bit of an FSD Beta driver tool, I think.
But I think also in that it needs to know it itself that it's doing that, and being transparent about what it's thinking about, I think is really good. If I may go to another issue that I've sort of had forever with Tesla, if I can bring that up to you. I have never seen a view in which it shows an overpass.
Why should it show an overpass if that's not part of the drivable space?
Because it senses the overpass. Okay.
Yeah, but the occupancy networks today right now are only showing things from the ground up, which is an interesting thing. I had a video in my recent unmarked roads drive where I had a branch hanging down that wasn't touching the ground, and it completely did not see it. So it feels like they're growing like a tree from the ground up, their drivable space. So it's an interesting question you asked, and especially now that radar is gone, overpasses with radar created a lot of issues. It's an interesting thought, though. I'd like to hear more about what you think.
Well, I really like your comment there, because I think it does see it. Okay. And it sees it as an object that is stationary. And if an object is stationary in the lane ahead, it disregards it. Which to me, I've said that it was the problem with the Joshua Brown crash. It saw the truck. it just saw a stationary object in the lane ahead, and it just it doesn't expect that. It expects that it can pass underneath all those. Why? Because as one drives down the road, do you know how many, at least maybe it's just here in Jersey, it's not that way in Florida, but how many overpasses, how many signs, how many traffic lights, how many branches, trees, and so on that you pass under, that in its field of view, it is sitting there with every object. It puts a position vector, velocity vector, acceleration vector, jerk vector, who knows how many derivative vectors on each one of those things in the end, somewhere in that spot. And it sees it. And it as it's showing here, it shows us the things that it sees. Things that move are really easy to discern because their velocity is different than yours, okay? And it's not, the negative of that. Stationary objects are of special character, okay? That they're the velocity vector, depending on which reference frame you use, are easily identifiable, which makes them easy to divert if they're along the side of the road. When they happen to be in the middle of your lane, and they just appear there. If you're following a car that comes to a stop, one of the best things that I think they put in there is doing their regression to get the coefficients using video and not just images. Because of the video, you basically have a history of data on a point. If the history of data on the point is a vehicle that you're following, then you've had that thing moving, all of a sudden, if it stops, you've already identified that as a vehicle. If you're coming over something that all of a sudden it appears, or the car in front of you moves out of the way, and all of a sudden there's something that appears that's stationary, what do you do? And all the crashes that they've had with ambulance, they said, or cars parked along the way. To me, I think you encounter these things so often when you drive. I mean, you think about when you drive, there are all these, you go around the corner, the darn pole's right ahead of you, but you're going to talk to me here. You thought about that one?
Oh, I have thought about it a lot, and I have two answers to it. First of all, I think this is the reason the occupancy networks have been created, because we no longer need to depend on perception for something to be thrown into its vector space. It now can just define, is something there, is something not, put the metadata inside of the 3D voxel that they can do perception upon should they need more precision inside of that voxel. So I think that is the first transformational change that they have incorporated to solve the problem you're working at with vision. Now, of course, we don't have sensor fusion anymore with a radar. A radar was a big tool that they were using, but obviously it had some Doppler-related vulnerabilities that created some decision points, so they took it away. I think it'll probably come back in the long run, but I think it'll be a high-definition radar that'll come back with a much more precise kind of a vector diagram that it'll create. So I do think that the pixels, the voxel getting smaller with higher resolution in these next few versions that I think we're working on right now is solving this problem one by one. But there's still some very unique vulnerabilities with very thin objects, something about the size of a 4x4, a railroad crossbar, or some private neighborhood gates that are made with wrought iron. It sees through those, which is much like the focal length of an eye or a camera that you can see through something. And I think they're just going to have to continue to work on these problems. We're not done yet, but I think we just have to tread carefully as we solve these individually. But and then Ashok at AI Day, I was fortunate enough to be invited to AI Day and listen to that presentation, but I've listened to it about 5 times now. I swear I learned every time I listened to it.
No, it was excellent. It was excellent.
The introduction that Ashok's new project being NERFs, neural radiance fields, I think is a whole nother transformational technology that's going to take this occupancy networks to the next level. So I don't think we're done yet, which means we can't be marching the 9s, because every time you change the neural network and retrain it to the point you've been making, we're not marching 9s, we're changing the solution and then retraining until we get to the point where we're satisfied.
Yes.
There are some, as you very well know, who've criticized Tesla for using customers like yourself almost as employees and doing the beta testing here. How do you view this, and how do you answer those critics?
It's a very good question. Obviously, I'm a volunteer. I signed up. Matter of fact, I sent them my resume going, hey, I think I'm a good candidate for this. But I did it out of my own personal interest, my own techie kind of hobbies. And I never realized it was going to get this big and how much fun I was going to have taking this apart. I do think that there is a demographic out there that just wants the new toy. And I like to make the analogy of much younger drivers. I'm 53 years old. I have life experiences. I've had an accident or two, and I've learned my lessons of what not to do. There's a very large group of people out there that have not learned that in life yet about the weight of a car, how much damage can be created, and loss of life that can happen. So I do worry that they broaden it to groups that don't have all of the perhaps experience to drive safely with something that is continuously changing. So there isn't an instruction manual. There's not a video to go watch. I've tried to put out a few safety videos for people to watch so they kind of know what they're getting into. But ultimately, the unique situation is the people that are testing it spend a lot of money on their cars. And back to the paying attention point at the unprotected left, when people have vested interest and money and they don't want to get into an accident, they're usually pretty attentive, which is, I think, the primary reason it's worked to this point is because people care about their cars. So I know it's a contested and debatable point. I am an advocate for my own personal decision. I am very cautious when they broaden it very quickly. I like to get out there and jump on my safety bandwagon and say, please drive safe. Give yourself, some time to build up what I call your sea legs in the Navy, right? The first few days on a ship, you're all kind of wobbly, but after a few days, you've kind of got your balance and know where you are. To an aviator, we call it the first 1,000 hours of flight time. Before 1,000 hours, you're still kind of stupid in the air. After 1,000 hours, you start to get confidence. And then there's another curve where you get complacency. Complacency is what could happen to a guy like me doing this for 2 years now. I think I got it wired, but then they change the software version. If I'm not paying attention every time the software changes, complacency can sneak in there. So these are all threats that we have to manage through risk mitigations. But that's kind of how I think about it, but recognizing that it is a debatable point.
I'm a big fan of crowdsourcing and information. I part of my at one point in my life, I was with Fred. We were doing turn-by-turn navigation and putting systems out there, and it was really nice that most of our customers wanted to help. Whenever the thing didn't do what the right thing, they wanted to offer advice, to offer help. It's really nice to see of customers and to engage customers in this, and to really be honest with customers, saying, hey, we're trying to develop, we're trying to improve. We'd like to make this better for you, and what better way to do it than engage your customers? So I think he's brilliant in doing this. Otherwise, it's almost it's unaffordable to do. Okay, whatever the numbers are that he puts up in terms of the miles driven with beta testers and crowdsourcing experience with FSD and autopilot, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, they're more than an order of magnitude greater than what Waymo's experience has been. Why? Because Waymo's done it all with its own employees. They haven't had the opportunity to get the good graces of the customer who wants to help, such as yourself. And this is a very valuable thing. And it really is probably the only way to do it. Otherwise, you go bankrupt. It can't be affordable. So, kudos to all of you to go out and help. But as you say, you have to take this seriously. It's not a toy. Cars can kill you, and do, at a rate of 100 plus a day. Okay, so this is serious business here, and pay attention. Damn it, don't misbehave.
Chuck, have you had a chance to ride in some of the vehicles being operated by Waymo or Cruise? What are your thoughts?
So I personally have not. I've tried. I don't get out to Arizona very much with my work and in that area. I've watched all of the videos. And I'm very excited about this new platform that Waymo has released. I think that iteration on hardware is amazing to watch. I love it when engineers solve problems and can make things smaller and better. And I think in their constrained domain, Waymo is doing a good job. Whether or not it is the right solution broadly, I think is to be determined. I know they've spent a lot of money out there without a whole lot of revenue coming in. So it really is a social experiment on whether or not they can solve the technical problem. Elon's strategy is a little bit more consumer based, working on selling the cars that will do something else one day in the future. So he's still making money quite well with Tesla right now while he's solving the same problem through a different strategy. I do think that the situation of when the Waymos get stuck and needing rescue drivers, and a lot of these sort of features will be something that our robo-taxi fleet one day will need to solve. How do you clean your cameras? How do you clean the interior? What do you do when you ultimately get stuck at the end of a one-way road and you cannot turn around? Do you send a rescue vehicle? I think these are all things that Tesla will have to solve one day. And if it's a consumer that owns that problem, how will it be notifying them that their taxi that was taking someone home from the bar at 1 a.m. is stuck? You need to go get it. Interesting things to think through, because ultimately you need a fail-safe in every engineering problem. You could even talk about trains where, or rails at airports, they are in a constrained operational domain and they cannot get off the rails, yet, they still get stuck sometimes, and you have to come out to the JFK airport and somebody's got to open the thing and turn it on and back it up and open the doors. Things happen. And I just think that this will be fun to watch.
That shouldn't be surprising. I mean, we do have AAA, and maybe we'll have triple B now that will go out and give us a jump or, fix. I mean, tires are going to need to be fixed. Okay, tires will still blow out. All right, so those are rare events compared to us.
Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing how good the car manufacturers have become. I mean, wheels just don't come flying off, and as we discussed earlier, 90% of or whatever the crashes are really, they're on us because of our misbehavior. They're not on the wheels falling off or transmissions dropping or whatever, oil pans and so on. So it is really good on that end of it. But in the end, I mean, I'm just not a perfectionist. I mean, if the objective is perfection, I'm going to go play golf. The hell with it. I mean, not even us engineers can solve those things. We can only solve some of the problems and get it to be somewhat good, such that it's a reasonable business case. Otherwise, government is going to have to do it. And
the government's going to come in on the regulation, the road signage, the future of how we can improve signs, and much like they have with the ADA, making intersections and everything much more ADA approved, so people can use these type of intersections. I think autonomy could benefit from a lot of that with regulations about signage.
What I think we could do benefit from that. I mean, just driving here in Jersey, can't they put some paint down so I can see the darn lanes? I mean,
that's down to funding, not regulation. The paint is supposed to be there. That's
I understand the paint's supposed to be there, but my goodness, I don't want gizmos out there. Just put some paint on there, and we've said that from the very beginning of this. The real value of all this is that the intelligence is in the vehicle, not the roadway. And therefore we have an opportunity to put the intelligence in there so that at least it might be able to negotiate with what's out there, as opposed to having to go through the expense of who knows what, magnets and roads and all this, whatever, and communicate and whatever. I mean, we that's not affordable. We decided.
Well, no, I guess I didn't mean. I wasn't thinking magnets on roads, but I'm thinking like the HOV lane logic. Hey, actually, that's very transferable to an EV only, or maybe an autonomous lane logic. Places that could benefit from that through tax incentives and things like that could work on those sort of solutions. But I am all about the car needs to know the world it's in and solve the world it's in, whether or not that's a constrained domain or the entire domain.
Right, and what bothers me about the exclusive AV lane is that's the one where these things actually work pretty darn well. That's where you don't need it. You need it at that unprotected left that's right behind you. I mean, to me, that is so hard. That is so
Yeah.
hard.
Well, I'm probably going to go drive it again today. I'm going to load up all my cameras.
Yeah.
And just get out there and create some more content. We are getting ready to get another release. It looks like 69.3.1 is imminent, and version 11 is going to be imminent too. So there's a bright future ahead. I like to always make the message of give the engineers time to solve the problem and unconstrain them a little bit from the handcuffs of perhaps some of the promises that have been made over time, and let them iterate and solve it.
Yeah.
Well, we love what you're doing, Chuck, and, and the videos.
We do, and we
so
appreciate
important.
it. We appreciate it and appreciate your contribution. Again, think about the stationary object above you next time you're really thinking of what the heck is it
maybe I'll even
there?
make some comments about it next time I see one, and I'll address you guys and say, hey, here's one of those things we talked about.
And one other thing, one thing that bugs me, okay, that you might, okay, I have intelligent cruise control in my car. Okay, just like the intelligent cruise control that's in the Tesla. If I have an intelligent cruise control, and I don't like this business about hands off, I think the most important thing is feet off. Okay, because to me, that's what intelligent cruise control does for me. I don't have to sit there and not worry about crashing in the back of somebody or getting a speeding ticket because I'm doing more than 9 over or something, whatever. It does that. If I tap the brakes, it turns the system off. And that drives me crazy. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, if I had stupid cruise control, the one that only did the throttle, okay, tapping the brakes means I want the throttle automation turned off. That's what I'm telling it. Okay. Yeah. If I tap the brakes where it does both the brakes and the throttle, I think it should just turn off the throttle, not the braking function. Because if I don't hit the brakes hard enough, it should jump in there and say, hey, Alan, I'm going to hit the brakes some more. I didn't all of a sudden decide, hey, you wanted to take over the brakes and it's on you. And then wait for the automated emergency braking system to be 1.6 seconds to collision. And then all hell breaks loose when it tightens this, what does it do to keep me from colliding? Yeah. It misses that whole gap from when I tapped it to when I'm 1.6, where it could have leisurely taken care of this. Why is that?
I completely agree. I completely agree with you.
It does that in your car too, right?
Well, yeah, I'll go back to the conversation we started with. First of all, using the accelerator is an intervention. It adds input to the solution without disconnecting it. Hit the brake, disengages everything as if that was your disengagement button. In an airplane, the same sort of thing could happen. If I pull back on the stick, it will disengage the autopilot. If I push forward on the throttles, it'll disengage the autopilot. But I have this magic button that is called the autopilot disconnect. It disconnects everything with the touch of a button. We need that on the car. And today on the car, it's lift the stalk vertically, but it's not an intuitive command for a user that's an extremis to use. But that is the same equivalent. You ought to be able to use the stalk as your primary disengage of all systems. In the brake, I agree. You know, if you're braking
the brake is not that. The brake is not that, right? No, it's just disengage
it's control input. It's a control input and disengagement, which is two combined commands that you're taking over and adding input at the same time, which can be dangerous.
Yeah. So anyway, it drives me nuts because anyway,
excellent.
Yeah, I just want somebody else.
We did get that in.
We got that in.
Let's turn to a couple of quick headlines, Alan.
Yeah, okay.
From the Smart Driving Cars newsletter. Real quick, Motional and Lyft launching a fully driverless ride-hail service in Los Angeles using the Hyundai Ioniq 5, according to Car Scoops. This is just another entrance here, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that that's where they should go. Okay. First of all, you know, they'll be number 3 at best in the market, and really they should look at more things that look more like Las Vegas, and that's not the Strip. But anyway, not thrilled. And of course, it's another Gunna as opposed to Dua. And, you know, I've heard enough about the Gunnas.
Right. Well, Waymo, we've alluded to this. Waymo at the auto show in LA, I think, is showing a new vehicle without a steering wheel or pedals built by Geely Group's Zeekr.
Yeah, so they have that, and that's nice, I guess. But to me, it looks like a very good driverless transit network vehicle as opposed to a ride-hailing vehicle. I mean, it's meant to be ride shared and so on and so forth, and not to basically take me to the airport, but maybe.
And along these same lines, Cruise has expanded its driverless robotaxi service in San Francisco. They were doing it nighttime only, and we've talked to them in the past.
Yeah,
now daytime as well.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I especially like their nighttime service because, in fact, that is providing service when Mooney's not operating. So, in fact, they are providing a mobility solution out there that's valuable. And if, in fact, they do it affordably, then that would be even better. And doing it during the day, good. It is only for employees right now. Of course, it still has a ways to go, such that they build a business out of it. One has to wonder with many of these folks. I mean, the burn rate is non-trivial, and the revenue rate is still zero. And so these are all pre-revenue, except for Mobileye, that's basically sells its stuff to auto manufacturers who do advanced driver assistance with them and so on. So there's a revenue stream for them. But all these other folks, I mean, at some point one has to ask, how long can they hang on?
As
the Mobileye question
contrasted before.
Yeah.
Tesla does, right?
Well,
Go ahead, Chuck.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yes, the Mobileye question is an interesting one because they're selling and licensing this software for many different car platforms, which goes back to the data collection is not the same across their entire network. So it's like they got all this data out there, but they got to put each of it in the bucket of, oh, this is on this kind of car, and this is on this kind of car, and this is on this kind of car. It's not the same, right? Whereas Tesla's data set is so homogeneous on its models of cars, it feels like Mobileye might end up having a data problem as compared to Tesla, but I do like their sensor their solutions. I do like the direction they're going with hardware, and I'm very impressed with what they've done. But it's interesting how the problem that they are putting it on so many cars, how they can leverage all of that data. Like, does it go down a path like, oh, we're really iterating on this one car installation type, but it's not translatable on the others? I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes, but of course I agree with you. There's nobody comparable to Tesla. You know, they put in the over-the-air updating. They're doing the continuous monitoring. They're collecting the data. They've put in the whatever fine print in the purchase agreements, such that at least most of the customers are saying that that's okay with me. Yeah, I'd love to help you out here. And so, you know, the data trove that Tesla has is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Okay.
To add to that, I've added a specific access point just for my Tesla, and I can measure the data up and down from my car. And that little snapshot button I have on FSD Beta, every time I hit that, I've measured that it looks like every time I hit it, it uploads about 1.5 gigs of data on that specific drive. So if I come back from 5 presses of that button, it's getting almost 10 gigs of data that's being uploaded in the first 30 to 40 minutes my car comes home. It is unbelievable what that snapshot does, in addition to the 8 cameras that I know are going back to the mothership. But that specific data, and I've gotten some feedback from engineers that a combination of a snapshot image and a disengagement at the same time, they go get my snapshot data and they take the camera data, they overlay it, and they look at it very, very, very closely. So, and I did speak with many of the engineers at AI Day and asked them a lot of questions about what am I doing that helps you so much? Why are you guys focusing on mine? And they said the repetitive nature that is historically evident. And they also asked me, can you leave Sentry mode on when your car gets home? That way your car doesn't go to sleep and the videos upload faster. Those are the 2 pieces of information I left AI Day with. So those engineers are working hard and looking at a lot of data.
Yeah,
Really interesting.
it is really brilliant to me, what they've done with this, because, GM had the opportunity because they had OnStar, they've had OnStar on vehicles. They could have done the communication piece, but this piece of it, just in terms of understanding what customers and so on, they have to be careful with respect to the privacy, and they don't want to, misuse this, but to use it in terms of improving the product, it is just so fundamental. And I don't, nobody else out there has anything that approaches it.
Yeah. Would you agree that graduates from college, such as the institution where you teach, look for places based on the size of their data set to go work for their first or second jobs?
No, probably not. But most of them, at least certainly out of my department, it all has to do with data. And the most important thing that I try to tell my students is it's not necessarily big data. It's the problems you're dealing with are so highly dimensional. It's big dimensions. There are many components. And the problem is that for many of the dimensions, you have no data or very little data. So what you really do have to have is an enormous trove, such that way down deep somewhere, you get some information about your unprotected left. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is, to find, because in the end, it's what we don't know, and we have to somehow trip over, find whatever. And and I don't believe in unsupervised learning. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I mean, that's just bull. Okay. I mean, what the amount of brain power we use to be able to come up with, some of the, hey, let's look at this, is just so enormous. None of these algorithms are anywhere close to doing any of that stuff. I mean, they're very, 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 very beginning of it. And so, to be able to deal with large data sets, find the data for which, in the dimensions for which you have really little, and figure out what the heck's going on in there and try to learn something out of the data, put your brain in there with it and get exposed to it. Just like if you hadn't gone out there, your brain hadn't gone out there to that unprotected left, how do you discover
so that's an interesting
that?
analogy. So the analogy I like to use is what you just said there. So you take somebody from out of town, or you can take somebody from out of the country, or you take somebody of a certain age. So if I were to put my 15-year-old daughter, when she was that age, in that term, with her life experience of physics, of recognition of accelerations, of what her eyes were bringing to her planet, and then brain, and then how to use the pedals that she's new to cross that intersection, she might die on her first try. Right? Because she didn't have the life experience to understand it. But if you take an experienced driver from Japan, perhaps with completely different laws, maybe a mature woman that's driving, and she could probably do it just fine, because the combination of acceleration, physics, maybe a few life lessons. Yeah. So I feel like Tesla is my 15-year-old daughter right now that has only got a limited number of experiences on how to use the sensors and the control it has. And it just needs to get older.
Yeah, well, I don't know when your kids had crashes. My oldest daughter, right after she got her license, tried to do a K-turn. Boom. I mean, the probability is almost 1 that she's not going to be able to do a K-turn, under the duress of, people coming at her. And of course she wasn't. Okay. I mean, now she does K-turns just fine. Thank you. I think so. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, this is where we are. And it is a lot of fun to do this. Okay. I mean, and I think it's worthwhile. I mean, we're out there trying to make this valuable to people, really to improve their quality of life, because, having good mobility, at least to some, really can change their lives. So anyway.
Yeah.
Wow, Chuck, this has really been terrific. And we are hoping you're going to be joining us again in the future too. This was a terrific discussion. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the work that you're doing out there, paid or not.
Well, I appreciate it. I am paid through appreciation, and I like to do this whenever I can. if one of the Tesla engineers happens to be watching this podcast, it's because of those guys. It's their effort, it's their sweat and tears that are going into this product. I get to benefit from it, and I'm proud that they use my content to make the product better. But really, it is their effort. We should be applauding, not mine.
Yeah, agree with you 100%.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you also to CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, for helping to make this podcast possible. CARTS is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Amazon, Spreaker, wherever you get podcasts from. Your smart speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please continue to stay safe.